Hello, and welcome to the ThinkJSOU webinar series, brought to you by the Office for Strategic Engagement. Today, we are pleased to present a distinguished speaker. This session is unclassified and will be recorded and posted to the JSOU network. Please keep in mind that the views and opinions expressed by all participants do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policy of the U.S. government, Department of Defense, or JSOCOM. If you have questions after this session, please email thinkjsou@jsou.edu.
Good day, everyone. I want to welcome you to another ThinkJSOU conversation. ThinkJSOU is an ongoing program that explores research and publications of leading academics and the wider SOF and international security community. Today, we have Dr. Mark Taylor, who is JSOCOM Chief Technical Officer, or CTO. Dr. Taylor is an appointed civilian senior executive, highly qualified expert, which is a grade equivalent to the SES. As CTO, he's responsible for the SOF Information Enterprise multi-cloud strategy, engagement with industry, academia, as well as fellow U.S. and international government agencies to identify future innovative technologies for incubation, cybersecurity compliance, and continuous integration and delivery. Additionally, he supports the optimization of acquisition methods, business processes improvement, and human capital management in perpetual service to JSOCOM's 70,000 plus global community. A native of Baltimore, Maryland, Dr. Taylor was commissioned in the U.S. Army in 1993. Prior to his HQE appointment, Dr. Taylor was a senior technology strategist with Microsoft, supporting the Department of Homeland Security through their digital transformation efforts and respective cloud journey. His primary technical background has been focused on federal cloud migration, network and data center design and implementation, as well as technical training to include IT certifications, undergraduate and graduate school. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Taylor. The floor is yours.
Hey, good morning. I'm Mark Taylor. I'm the CTO for Special Operations Command J6. And today I'm going to talk about the Enterprise Cloud Management Framework, which is pretty much part of a dissertation that I worked on when I was working on my doctorate. And essentially, it's all about identifying and overcoming the barriers to cloud adoption within the government space, which is something that it's been my observation working in and around the DoD and the IC for the last 30 years. That's been kind of a troubling part of digital transformation. And basically, what is that? That's essentially always trying to improve, always trying to do something better, always trying to do something in a more modern way. And essentially, cloud, which is not even new anymore, it's 20-ish years old, is something that the government has really been working, I wouldn't say struggling anymore, but it's definitely been working to get and become part of the way that the government does business. And so I've supported cloud and cloud efforts both as a contractor, a wrench turner, as a vendor working at cloud service providers, and now back again in the government service. So what I created was the Enterprise Cloud Management Framework, which is essentially a two-dimensional depiction of an abstract concept of a set of processes on what it is that the government can do to either identify what is needed to get into the cloud, but also to identify those barriers, whether they be internal, external, cultural, ideological, political, whatever, financial. And then as you identify those different attributes or those different barriers, come up with a plan to address them and how to move forward, and then eventually get into the cloud and come up with a perpetual or self-licking ice cream cone in terms of processes to continue to improve and to continue to get to where we need to go. So with that, I'll kind of dive into it, and throughout this, I'm sure that graphics will be shown to help illustrate the point that I'm talking about, and hopefully they'll be available to you after this. But essentially, you start off with step one of the binary. Are you going to the cloud, yes or no? If you're legitimately going to do it, then get prepared to go through the process and to go through the effort, the learning, the pain to get there. And then if you're not, then just quit now. It's easy to quit. Just give up. But let's say that you decide to move forward and actually go on this journey. then you need to go through a couple of things. And I've kind of put together 5 steps, and these are the 5 steps that Mark Taylor's identified over the last 10, 15-ish years. And they are in the priority that I think they are needed. So I haven't gotten to the part that's got the statistics and the math and all of the actual PhD level stuff behind it. And essentially is identify the reasons that you're going to go to the cloud. Are you going to go there because you think it's cool? That tends to be a knee-jerk reaction of any kind of new injection of technology is, oh, we want to do this because this is the cool thing. 15 years ago in government, everyone needed an e-business. We need an e-business. Hey, Mark, can you get me an e-business? I'm like, well, what are you trying to do? I don't know, I need an e-business. That was the big thing. So don't just try to get to an e-business. Try to realize, like, what is your motivation? Are you trying to do things faster, cheaper? Are you trying to do things easier? Are they scalable? What are the reasons? 2, identify the organization that will be handling the migration. Do you have people that can do it? Do you need to hire people? Do you need to train your people? Or do you need to do some kind of mixture? Do you need to use some of the people that you got that, oh, by the way, have day jobs? And do you need to hire some consultants that can either work with them, lead them, or just completely outsource it? So you need to identify that. Who's going to do the work? Just assuming away the problem that you can do every single thing that you've got time, money, and capability to do today to do all these new things in addition to your day job is probably not very realistic. 3, identify the source of funding. Do you have money to do it? In the government, you have to palm your money. So I know that I have this requirement and I'm going to get my money 2 years from now. Okay, that means I need to come up with UFERS or any other kind of funding stream or take it out of hide until such point in time that my money can turn on. And that's just the government. In corporate America, it's probably a little different. And also outside the government, you have the ability to try to come up with other ways to make money. 4, identify your champion. Who is going to lead this charge? Leadership comes from the top, right? So is your CIO championing this? Is your president championing this? If this is just some random architect, then maybe that person has enough political capital to get it done. But does that person have the ability to sway and direct funding and direct hiring and direct firing and direct whatever it is that you need to do to actually get the organization to move forward? You got to shoot, move, and communicate as one unit. You have to have all oars rowing in the same direction. Otherwise, it's just not going to work very effectively. And then I finally identify what it is that you're going to do in this new cloud reality. What is it that you are going to do? Are you going to do the same things that you do today, or are you going to do net new things in the cloud? And it might be a hybrid, and over times it might change. So these are the 5 steps that you really got to knock out in order to get to the next phase of identifying the blockers that you then need to overcome. All right, so let's talk about the blockers to cloud adoption that I've noticed. And like I said, I worked on this in my doctorate, my dissertation, in which case utilized a sample size working with expert judgment. So came up with a large number of blockers, which I deem as attributes, and came up with a pairwise comparison. So I'm not going to try to not get into the boring math part, but essentially stack rank them, use binary logistic regression to then not only identify what they are, what's most important, but then to validate their importance relative to the responses of experts. So now that all that nerd stuff's out the way, I'll kind of go through what they are. And essentially, as you would guess, the first is security and risk management. If security and risk management, which, based off of questions, is not addressed early and upfront, then pretty much anything that you do in the DoD or the IC space is going to be a no-go. Specifically in the government, security is foremost, and securing our data and the access to our data is obviously paramount. So coming up with a risk mitigation strategy, the how-to, pretty much will belay or allay the fears of folks that are security-minded. The next one is coming up with your availability, your integrity, and your confidentiality, which is pretty much the hallmark of, can I get access to my data? Can I control the data? Now we're starting to talk about zero trust, credential management, ICAM, identity and access management. Third is governance and compliance. Is there a mechanism to look at, are we doing the things that we need to do? Can we improve? Are we compliant with the previous security and control mandates? Flexibility and scalability. Are the things that I'm going to do in the cloud going to allow me the ease to horizontally scale out what I need, or to rapidly prototype and create something net new? If not, then right there, why probably am I even thinking about going to the cloud? I'll probably just do it on-prem. Next is cost savings. Initially, costs are going to go up because normally you're not going to have money up front to do cloud. Normally you're going to take it out of hide, palm money, and then wait until your palmed money turns on in a year or two, right? So that means you're normally going to have to wait for that money to come, and then you're going to have to extract the value out of what you put into the cloud to realize the net benefit. But until then, you're paying on-prem and you're probably paying in the cloud. So it's going to be very easy for the naysayers to go, hey, look, boss, this cloud thing's just way more expensive. Well, by nature, the way we tend to do it, it tends to be more expensive. Commercial corporate America does not have this problem because they've got none of these regulations that they have to follow. They've got very few of the same exact discrete security compliance regulations to follow. And normally, I'm a kid in my mom's garage creating the next Facebook or something. I've got no infrastructure that I have to maintain today. I'm building net new cloud native in the cloud, so I can realize that value up front. So cost savings will come over time once you've identified how to extract and realize value of your investment. Enterprise management insights. Do I have a way to look at, measure, monitor, and get metrics out of what I'm doing in the cloud? There are many agencies that are still trying to figure out how to do that on-prem. What started out as a cottage industry about 20 years ago with NetCool and all these other tools is now just considered normal on how you're going to monitor and manage the cloud relative to logs and events and things like this. Organizational cloud skills, the training, the people. Do your folks understand how to manage the cloud? Are they familiar with AWS portal or Azure portal or Oracle portal or Google portal? Do they know how to be a cloud operator, right? And that was the term, I don't know if it took, that was a term about 2 or 3 years ago they were trying to use, which is kind of funny now that I'm at SOCOM. But it's real easy to get a person who knows X router or Y storage device. When you start becoming a cloud person, you have to know it all. You have to, and to pass the certs, you have to understand Cloud 101, you got to understand routing and switching, you got to understand networks, you got to understand OSs, you have to understand a lot of stuff. I will tell you, it's a lot easier once you get over that barrier, and it makes looking back at doing the old things, the old hard way, it's a lot easier. But again, it takes the investment. Luckily, though, most of the training is now offered free, and there's nothing that you can't learn for free on YouTube from most of these vendors. Let's see, pre-cloud infrastructure management. What does that mean? Garbage in, garbage out. If you don't know what you have on-prem and you're not extracting any value out of what you got on-prem, and if you just try to do an IaaS migration, just forklift move it, all you've done is moved your garbage, right? So you should try to refactor. You should try to probably make a demarc and say, we're going to put net new things in the cloud. If you want to move something from on-prem to the cloud, then is it a cloud candidate? Is that workload something that could go to the cloud? Mainframe workloads can go to the cloud, but they're usually not ideal candidates. Solaris or old versions of Unix probably aren't the best candidates, but there's a lot of Unix. Unix or Linux is like 60-70% of cloud operating systems that are in the cloud today. So it's not that it's not an ideal candidate. You just got to make sure that the version that you have is an ideal candidate. Otherwise, you have to refactor. I have to take what I'm doing today that may be kind of busted and figure out how do I recreate that same capability or refactor it into a cloud capability. And then finally, environmental impact. A lot of the cloud providers are now through their data centers working very hard to have a zero footprint, which means these data centers, these facilities are the greenest possible. By proxy, if you're utilizing that and you're not using your stuff within your on-prem site, you're becoming more green. That may or may not be a key or critical issue, but in the Fed space, there's no building that can be built, like I think as of the last 10 years, that is not LEED Silver certified from the jump. So right there, the government is telling the government that we have to be green, right? So going to the cloud is inherently greener. So that's pretty much the attributes, the 9 attributes that I have identified in this discrete order of their importance. And again, on the Enterprise Cloud Migration Framework doc, you should be able to see it. And I've got the top 4 listed in a little bit larger because those are the specific ones that I really dug in on the math. If you care to dig in, we can talk about that further another time. But the last thing I'll talk about is, okay, so you've come up with the steps that you need to look at in order to decide if you're going to go to the cloud and have any hope of being successful. I've identified the blockers to overcome or to at least address, or in the terms of attributes to get into the cloud. And then finally, what's the self-correcting governing mechanism? Well, you got to have a knowledge management framework so that you capture all of the things that you've done, and you have some kind of medium in which case knowledge can be kept internal to the organization so that as folks age out, retire, quit, and get other jobs, you can bring in new folks that then at least know, how do we do it? How are the things that we've learned? What are the good? What's the bad? What's the ugly? And then come up with some mechanism to then come up with a governance tool to try to figure out, based off of these metrics and these things that we've learned, how do we improve over time? So that KM function, that knowledge management function, is vital so that we keep institutional knowledge within the institution, and we have some kind of way to course correct or to guide our future decisions based off of this. Because cloud is just, the cool thing over the last 10, 20 years. Fog computing is nothing but cloud, at a local kind of method. But 5, 10 years from now, there's going to be something new. So that's what I've got on that, and I hope that makes some sense, barring any questions. Right, so in the cloud, you've got complete control over your data because you have control over all of the access. A lot of folks are worried about the cloud because they say, it's less secure and the cloud service provider can connect to anything. Well, I guess technically that is the case, but they have to let you know, and they have to get technical capabilities to enable their access. So what does that mean? The cloud natively is more secure than on-prem. Why? Because the cloud by itself is an OS. You can't do anything, you can't create anything, you can't connect to anything without an event or a log being created. So if you configure things the proper way, there is a trail or a paper trail of every single action. Within the service providers, they set it up so that they have to get, through a zero trust mechanism, access and approval via the customer in order to take control or to access things. So for example, if you lose the keys to the kingdom to access your own instantiation, depending on the cloud provider, you might have completely black holed that resource, in which case not even the vendor can get access to your stuff. So that's kind of rule number 1. What's your next question? Right, as long as zero trust has been properly established, you have the right tools, then probably no. The only way that data really gets hacked today is through flipping credentials. Identity is really that new boundary that we see globally being the point of penetration. So what do I mean? Really, you don't have the moat defense, the castle and moat defense of legacy IT or tech. And what does that mean? Essentially, you'd have your firewall and your router, and you'd have your intrusion detection platform. Well, if your intrusion detection platform detects something, well, you've already been intruded on, so it's already like a after the fact kind of thing. Nowadays, general security identifies threats through a person that has the access to the network, and so they hack that individual, and so they come in using their credentials. So it's kind of like, if I steal your key to your house, did I break into your house? No, I let myself into the house with a key that you own. So I didn't break into your house. I just was not authorized to be in your house. So it sounds like kind of a fudge answer, but that's the way that modern IT is being hacked today. Of course, I'm sure there's other ways, but that's essentially it. And that's what we and everyone else is looking for as a way to mitigate that risk. Right, so that's a complex question with a complex answer. Essentially, we don't know. You don't know what the costs of cloud are totally going to be. You can come up with a discrete snapshot of what your costs will be if you are migrating, or you know exactly what you want to build in the cloud based off of a snapshot in time today. So I know I have a server with this much processing, this much RAM, this much storage, and it's going to have this much utilization. Yes, I can come up with a discrete cost. But what that does not account for is utilization over time, good and bad. The good is that over time, storage always gets cheaper, roughly around every 3 to 6 months, and compute, or the processor, always gets cheaper around 6 months to every 12 months. So those costs always go down. But it's that utilization of a VM or an AMI or some kind of resource that nobody knows. I don't know how much people will use it. And so you're going to get hit with a couple of charges. You're going to get charged with the exfiltration connection of data. That's a charge. And then you're also going to be hit with your consistent network connectivity fee. So ultimately, over time, your costs tend to go down because you don't have a capital expenditure of X hundred or millions of dollars to buy all of this hardware. Then you try to extract the value out of it over time. And then you have an operational expenditure relative to people to operate it on it, as well as for warranties and maintenance and all of these things. Rather, in cloud, it's cheaper from the sense that you don't have capital expenditure. You go right into an operational expenditure. So I don't have to buy into my gear. I don't have to buy $1 million or $2 million worth of gear to then just start extracting value. I can configure it and start extracting value, and I'm just paying the operational expense. Also, I can turn off what I'm not using, and I'm not going to get charged when I'm not using it. So ultimately, it's going to be a couple of different answers. And I know this is going long, and I know it sounds wonky. A, you really don't truly know your upfront costs unless you are going to discretely move a finite widget to the cloud. If you're going to configure services, then it's going to probably be cheaper if you're trying to replace something that's on-prem, because you're getting rid of capital expenditure, you're going into operational expenditures. Things are going to get cheaper over time. But then the part that you don't know, the delta, and all of the cloud service providers wish they had the magic ball to figure this out, is how much utilization will you have over time. So ultimately, things will also seem more expensive in the short term. Why? Because I'm paying for things in two different places. If I have an on-prem mission and I'm moving stuff to the cloud, I'm still paying for my on-prem mission unless I move it to the cloud. If I move something to the cloud and I don't turn it off on-prem, now I'm paying for it twice. The other part of it, as I talked about with Palm, well, if I know that I'm going to the cloud, but I don't get my money turned on from 2 years, now I have to pay for my cloud effort out of other money until such point in time as I get that cloud money turned on. So it sounds complex, and this specifically has been a reason for many years why many government agencies have been so hard pressed to go to the cloud, because they're trying to find the people that are going to work on the cloud in addition to their day job, and the money to buy all this net new capability. The easier way to approach it is to say, I am either going to have a line in the sand to build all net new things in the cloud, or I am going to discretely migrate X into the cloud, and when it's in the cloud, I will turn X off on-prem. So I hope that answers the question. So all of the cloud providers that we work with are globally aligned. So that's a good thing. Because cloud's global. Cloud is not just something that we look at here. So certain, there's different impact levels. Some of the impact levels are strictly CONUS based for certain reasons. So there's that too. Right, so we got to identify the reasons that might be. Normally, it's because the telco or your ISP or your network connection or your WAN connection went down. And so 9 times out of 10, well, the cloud's available and the service is available, you just can't get to it. And I know that sounds like a cute answer, but that's normally what it is. And so folks will then say, well, because some ISP, I'm not going to name any, went down, or our WAN router went down, the cloud went down. That's not really the case, because remember, in cloud, your WAN is now part of your LAN. That's now part of your connection. However, in full disclosure, there have been times when the cloud providers have gone down, and I can count on one hand the amount of times that's happened, but it has happened. So we have to make sure that we design our networks in such a way that they are highly available, which means we have set them up so that they're resilient, so they're either peering or sharing workloads between something that's on-prem, if it's that mission critical, so that should we be disconnected or be in a DDoS or disaffected manner, we could then serve out that capability on-prem if needed. Again, it's like a COOP or a DR, disaster recovery scenario. You have to pick and choose those things that are so mission critical that would really affect your mission. Right, so the cloud providers that we're working with have a global presence, so there's that. The second part is we utilize a number of different telecom methods, and I'm not going to get into all of them, specifically on how to get back to specific government regions that may be CONUS based. Security has to be foremost, and as I go forward, that's the key blocker. Essentially, you just got to make sure that we keep our heads on a swivel and we continue to do things the way that we normally do, in terms of being vigilant, in terms of making sure that any of the data that we connect or the connection processes or the methods are following all of the right rules, whether it be FedRAMP or whether it be something that's related to one of the ICDs, if it's something that's more TS in nature or more secret in nature. Outside of that, a lot of just modern IT is secure by nature, by making sure you have encryption in flight, encryption at rest, and making sure that the companies have SLAs, that they have folks that have the right credentials or the right citizenship relative to what it is that we're doing. And that's, again, specific to DoD or higher level agencies that care about connecting into the cloud.